All right. It looks like we've got everybody in who's here for the live simulcast. And then we'll, of course, have lots of people who want to see it on video afterwards. Really excited to have everybody today. Just to all the folks who are here to join us, we have a few things that we've discussed and planned for that we want to share with you today, but the chat is always open. We're all pretty great about responding in the chat, and if we miss something, I can call it back out, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. But use that chat function, stay engaged with us, let us know what you're interested in or areas that we might need to drill down. So I've got a little script I'm going to read from to welcome you all formally to Integrate Online, which is, of course, presented by West Virginia University's Reed College of Media, which offers renowned online master's degree programs in marketing communications. This session is brought to you as part of Comm's Fest, a week-long virtual conference celebrating marketing communications. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Today, as you know, we'll be discussing marketing trends and predictions for 2022. I can't believe 2022 is just around the corner, although I'm a little relieved about that also. Our expert panelists today are John Lorenzini. John, give us a wave. Amy, wave at everybody. And Deidre West. And so I don't want to waste any time today because I'll kind of do a little bit of introduction and they'll be introducing themselves as they start to sort of talk to you, but you also had a chance to read their bios. So let's just hear from them and start out. I've got a question for you guys. The recent pandemic, I know we're all tired of talking about it, but it really did bring about some changes to the industries that we face in the media and communication landscape. So each of you, I'm going to go through and I'll call on you one by one if you would. Just tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about the predictions that you're seeing in your particular space that will impact marketing in the coming year. So Amy, I'm going to start out with you. If you want to introduce yourself to the crowd and tell us what your top prediction is or top predictions.
Hi, of course. I'm Amy Teller. I am an online adjunct instructor at WVU's Reed College of Media and the Digital Marketing and Communications Graduate Program, where I teach digital marketing, audience segmentation, mobile marketing, and I will be teaching customer engagement ethics and strategy. I'm also a section leader at the Mason School of Business at the College of William & Mary, where I teach strategic marketing in the online MBA program, as well as integrative campaign marketing and digital content management in the online master's in marketing program. And I also do a little consulting work on the side for tech startups. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I feel like there are two major COVID-driven innovations that I expect are going to be making an impact in the coming year. And first is this kind of continued trend toward end-to-end digital customer experience. So, as we know, the pandemic created really a fundamental shift in consumer behavior, which really mandated that marketers quickly innovate their strategies to survive, right? And this forced many organizations to reevaluate their missions, reconsider their value propositions, and then reimagine their strategies to leverage the power of digital. So from museums that had to digitize the virtual visitor experience, to retail and restaurants that had to move to purely online ordering and direct to consumer and curbside pickup distribution channels. We all saw this huge shift to creating a digital experience for consumers across all customer touch points. And this reliance on kind of what digital does best in alignment with the organization's core values. So, for example, while digital can't replace the visual immediacy that comes with the experience of, experiencing a work of art in person, digital allowed museums to offer viewers kind of granular details of compositions and works of art and the brushstrokes of the maker in a way that they otherwise wouldn't have experienced. And for businesses really to kind of expand their reach via social in a way that they hadn't before. And I think many of these trends will continue, But perhaps the biggest impact the pandemic had was on marketing philosophy, if you will. So at the height of the pandemic, we saw many brands acting in the best interest of the collective good. So, for example, my Nike training app offered free trainer-led programs. We heard of distilleries cutting production and shifting operations to produce hand sanitizer. And this had a big impact on things like brand trust and loyalty. And I think we're going to continue to see this trend towards a more authentic and genuine corporate social responsibility in response to things like environmental and social challenges.
I love all of that. You were talking about the event experience, and it made me think about the Van Gogh experience that so many has been popping up, and talking about authenticity and corporate social responsibility and the impacts on the environment and so forth. All really important topics. So I'll love to dive into those a little bit more deeply as we move through our conversation. But John, now I'm going to kick it to you. Tell us who you are and what you see as your pandemic-driven major trend or prediction for 2022.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm John. I work at Snapchat. I've been here for a year and a half. Before that, I was at Facebook and then Google before that. So doing my big tech tour. In terms of predictions, I think Amy hit the nail on the head, especially with retail and restaurants. I'm a group lead for marketing science, which is just a fancy word of saying I'm a numbers nerd. And I run a small team of numbers nerds that run experiments. And the experiments are used to understand how marketing works, doesn't work, and give that feedback back to our clients to be like a mirror and say, this worked, this didn't work, this is what we should try next. And then with our product team, here's what we probably need to build. Here are other pieces that we might need to improve upon. So I cover retail, restaurants, travel, and energy. And I think some of the things that Amy touched on right before me about the shift of how you consume has shifted drastically. How many of you guys, and you could ping it in the chat, how many of you guys have downloaded a new app because of the pandemic? Either like DoorDash or, right? Yeah, DoorDash or Uber Eats or something along those lines. We saw a huge uptick in people downloading and installing apps during that time. It was almost like a gold rush. Same thing with retailers, when everything was on lockdown, the buy online, pick up in store options started growing. So fundamentally, the way people do commerce has changed during that period of time. But in terms of the different trends, one of the biggest things with measurement right now is privacy focused and privacy safe measurement. So I don't know if you guys have iPhones, but if you do, there's been a lot of updates lately. There's a lot of, they're calling it popping a modal, which is that thing that says, do you agree to let these people track, this information? And this is something that's becoming more and more transparent to consumers, which I think is a really good thing that Apple has been pushing, but it makes it very complex in terms of measurement. So as these shifts occurred, our advertisers are freaking out. They're like, oh my God, Snapchat's no longer working. But that's not true. It's like, we work the same before the update as after the update. It's just a matter of what can we measure. So understanding and reframing how measurement works and then what is important or not important based off of these privacy changes is creating a lot of changes in 2021, and it's going to continue in 2022. So the increase in privacy is now saying, how are we going to measure using old school tech, like market mix models or last click attribution, or the things that came out quite a while ago before all the privacy focused initiatives were kicked off in the past 2 years. So there's going to be an over pivot. There's going to be a whole bunch of people going back to the old ways of measuring. How they measured television, how they measured radio is how they're going to be measuring Snapchat and some other digital platforms. Reach-based, audience-based. It's kind of like, instead of a scalpel, it's a sledgehammer to say, like, you hit this, what happens? You hit that, what happens? So there's going to be an over pivot, I think, in a short period of time towards those traditional methods. And in the meantime, they're going to be building more privacy-centric, privacy-safe ways of being able to measure and track. So if you run experiments, on user bases, on customers, on things like that. So how does Snapchat and their advertisers communicate in a way where they're not passing information to each other, but matching it in a environment that we don't know who's who. So it's kind of these new evolution of technology that's saying, okay, we want to know how it performs, what works, what doesn't, but we don't want to know who you are, because that is obviously something that is a big concern now. So I think those are my main trends there, and I got a lot of stories for that.
I love that. And John, you've got a question in the chat. I think if you want to take a look while we move on to Deidre, who I think is going to have some great insights for us on the event planning and events landscape. I know we're all hungry to get back out there, and it's a really important space for so many of us. So Deidre, I'm going to kick it to you to introduce yourself and tell us what your top prediction is.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Deidre West. I am an adjunct with WVU Reed College of Media. I teach in the event planning minor. So that's the event planning, event promotion, and event execution courses. And in my newest role, as of last month, I am the account director at Quintessentially, and we just rebranded last week. And so the new agency name is QX. And so the X focusing more on experiential, and that's, one of the biggest innovations that I think is impacting the event industry is really how can you make a better, more impactful user or attendee experience. And so, it's basically what Amy and John just spoke about. It's really changing the way people who are consumers are engaging with brands and really everything in our lives. And so, while for events, you used to try to think outside of the box, there is no box anymore. Everything is about how creative can you be? How innovative can you be? And, you really just think about it being at an all-time high, because it's not just about competing against another company or organization's event and what can get that attendee there. It's really what's going to make people leave their houses. There are still a lot of people who are uncomfortable with gathering, and, more than with those that live in their current household. There are still those who don't feel comfortable going to in-person events, especially those indoors. Some people have only gone to things outside. And so now, as the weather is starting to change, what does that look like? More people are, especially for the end of this quarter and this current year and planning for Q1 of 2022, really are challenged to be innovative, to get people to still come outside, to get them engaged. And so what does that look like? What is the appeal? Even with restrictions, how can you be innovative enough to make someone say, you know what, I want to attend that, or that sounds really cool. So I think just in terms of innovation regarding events, we're going to see it continuously evolve, which, I've spoken to some of my colleagues about as well as students, that I think that events are a little harder to pinpoint when it comes to the academic rigor, because it's constantly changing with the new laws and the rules and guidelines and protocols. What was applicable last month is, not applicable now, and it won't be for next month. So if you're planning an event in November or December, what does that look like, and how do you modify those changes? And as event planners, I am always thinking of plan A, B, C, D, and E, because I'm a type A. I like to have an extra, scenario under my belt and what I think could happen. But now it's like even going beyond that because of the changes. You have to have, well, what if this changes? What if we can increase numbers? What if we have to decrease numbers? What does that look like? What if we have, we're already at capacity for what the COVID restriction numbers might be, but what if that changes? And so how can you make hybrid as appealing to those who would potentially come, because you don't want to lose your customer base? And so I think that the hybrid aspect, as well as online, is going to continue to innovate, because it has to be more than just sitting in front of a computer and hearing people talk about their product or why you should spend your dollars on that. And so when you think about entertainment, that's one of the biggest things that we've seen a lot of changes. And you look at Instagram and how you can just access people and companies and celebrities in a way that we didn't just, 2 years ago. So with the rise of, the innovation, I think just looking at one company, Pandora and Sirius XM, they're having what they're calling small stage performances. And so they've had everyone from Kane Brown to her to Kenny Chesney to Dave Matthews Band to Alicia Keys. And so they're doing these tailored small customized experiences for about, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 people. And so while some might say, well, that still sounds like large numbers, when you think of the arenas that this caliber of celebrity and performers have traditionally gone to, this is a much smaller number. And so I think that more brands will start to engage artists of all categories in those ways that can provide a smaller number of people an intimate access. You talked about the Van Gogh experience. That's one thing that actually was here in New York City. But I think that we are going to see even more of those types of experiences for small numbers of people. And that's one way that not only the companies and museums and brands can continue to innovate, but we as consumers and attendees of events can be excited. And then the last one that I think really impacts all industries, and it was spoken about a little bit ago, is the food and beverage industry. And that's a big part of events. How do you serve food? But not just serve it, how do you engage people who are at events? And so one of my favorite catering companies is called Pinch Food Design, and they're based here in Manhattan. And they have always had really cool ways of providing the food to people. And so you'll see these really large, shelves and things that, they're closed and they're walking, and then all of a sudden the other caterer grabs one end, or the other waiter, grabs one end, and then it opens. And so that's how you then walk up from each side and you grab your hors d'oeuvres. So I think we're going to see more companies using those types of tactics, because people don't want to really do buffets or be in close proximity to someone else who's also grabbing their food. And so I think just the last one is really just looking at the way restaurants, and John mentioned this, have shifted. Some have even changed their cuisines entirely, or some that were, bakeries have now turned to cafes, and it's just, take out. So you get a sandwich and a baked good and maybe a beverage that they now are starting to serve. And that's your to-go box. So I think that we're going to continue to see more of that as we progress through this pandemic. But I think for long term, it's just a great way to make an impactful change for the audience.
Great. And fun fact, last night we did an event here at WVU for students, and of course we're masked in the facility, but there was about 120 students in the building and participating in an interactive simulation, like you said, more experiential, but we also boxed their food for them to take. So nobody wants to be eating from a buffet anymore. Ew. Maybe that's just my own bias. All right, now we're going to drill down a little bit, and I'm going to start out with Amy. So we've got to spend about the first 20 minutes doing a sort of high level picture of what it is across some different industries that we see as emerging trends. And now we're going to dig into this a little bit more. So Amy, let's start with you. I know you've been active with the Virginia Small Business Development Center, and this is a really exciting space, I think, or exciting time for small business. So your experience with their innovative commercialization assistant programs that helps entrepreneurs bring new technologies and innovation to the market should give us some great insights. But based on this experience, tell us a little bit about what you see as potential innovation in the technology space for small businesses and entrepreneurs.
Well, there is a key set of these kind of emerging technologies that I believe will likely prove to be differentiators in the industry. And, there are a number of trending buzzwords out there in the MarTech space, including things like 5G, IoT, the Internet of Things, blockchain technologies, XR, extended reality. But I think particularly for small businesses and entrepreneurs, there's going to be this greater emphasis, first and foremost, on automation. So today, with many small businesses experiencing a continued shortage of workers, for example, automating tasks will take on greater importance. So technologies such as artificial intelligence, they offer increased efficiency and relevance by improving predictions and anticipating consumer needs. And I think we're going to continue to see the automation of marketing efforts, such as SMS and email marketing, which is essential, particularly for small businesses with limited resources. I think there's also going to be this continued trend toward micro advertising. So COVID created an increased need for social connectedness, right? Our worlds became very small, which in turn fostered an increased sense and need for community, right? And I think small businesses in particular are really strategically positioned to capitalize on this trend of building relationships within local communities and then cultivating those connections through digital channels. So I believe there's going to be this move to deepen their connection with their local loyal customer base, which is really paramount today more than ever through things like highly personalized content. And then lastly, I believe we're going to see big developments in quantum computing as the kind of new computing paradigm that really, marks an opportunity in the entrepreneurial tech space. So for those of you who might not know what quantum computing is, I'll just take a quick deep dive. It's based on quantum mechanics, basically. And in essence, it is really a fundamental shift in how computers process data. So traditional computers can only encode information in bits, right? That takes the value of either a 0 or a 1, right? Well, quantum computing uses quantum bits or qubits to harness this unique ability of subatomic particles to exist in more than one state. So they can be both a 0 and a 1 concurrently. I know, mind blown. It's incredible. So while traditional computing systems are linear, right, quantum systems run multidimensional algorithms. And so they can really solve these highly complex statistical problems in a fraction of the time. And some potential applications include things like driverless cars, pharmaceuticals, cybersecurity, and even in digital marketing for optimization, right? So for things like search engine optimization, SEO, and pay-per-click advertising, search advertising, for instance. So I think there's going to be some really fun and exciting things on the horizon for 2022.
You said driverless cars, and it reminded me of being in Pittsburgh. And I think there's a hub perhaps there of where they're testing driverless cars. And the first time one went by, I mean, we go to Pittsburgh all the time, so this has been some time ago. What is going on? My husband's like, oh, that's so cool. Like he's ready to chase it down the street and see what's going on because he's a car guy. And I'm like, are we safe? And now it's like, we see them go by and we're like, oh, there goes another one. So it's interesting how fast these trends and changes and innovations become part of our daily life. And all of a sudden we're looking at new predictions, which brings me to John. I want to come to you now. For years, you've been working in the measurement space, which of course I love the measurement space, also a nerd like the rest of you. But you've been doing this at Google, Facebook, Virgin Mobile, and now marketing science group lead at Snapchat. So based on your extensive body of work, tell us a little bit about what you predict to be the big trends in measurement for 2022.
For sure. So first off, the driverless cars with Carnegie Mellon out there, they have a big hub for it. And when I used to work at Google, they had the driverless cars around campus, and they were so conservative about making lefts that if you were stuck behind one, you would be stuck for a while. And it's like, just make the left. It's fine, go. So that was a couple of years ago. Hopefully they're better at making lefts now. But yeah, I think to Amy's point, all the automation, AI, machine learning, the stuff that we actually have a team that we collaborate with, the Google AI and ML team, to work on some projects in terms of how can we automate, simplify, understand, and dive deeper at scale. So one of the hardest things I think with measurement is quantifying the impact of a creative ad. right? Like, how do you say this ad is impactful and good, and this ad is not impactful and bad? I mean, we can measure after the fact. We could say, hey, this is how things are working or not working. But what are the signals that we can gain? And a little bit of what we're doing with that, and this is a little bit of a left tangent, so sorry, but we're using computer vision to look at the ads and say, like, where is the logo? How big is the logo? How long has it been on screen for? And quantifying that across a lot of ads. And then using that, we can see, does it relate to the outcomes of, do they remember the ad? Are they interested in the product? Did they buy the product? And seeing if there's any of those relationships there. Now, in terms of the trends for measurement specifically, I'm going to keep it kind of high level because measurement can get a little boring. But as we, well, I mean, you're one of the special ones then. But for some of the trends, like the privacy focused measurement that I brought up earlier, you know, the ownership of identity is such an important thing. So there's a thing called open loop or closed loop. Closed loop means you see the ad, you buy the product, all within one ecosystem. You're not passing data, you're not receiving data. It's all closed loop. So we're seeing Shopify and a lot of other people create solutions where people can convert on platform. So if you see an ad and you click buy, and then it takes you right to, you know, an Instagram shopping cart, or, you know, a Google shopping experience. That's in order to shorten that, to say, here is the ad and here is the impact. So I think one of the things is ownership of identity and where that exists. If you're a retailer, knowing who your customers are and being able to say, like, these are the people that, you know, buy these kind of products, maybe show them these kind of ads. And a very popular, famous example of this was Target got so good at it, they would do customized circulars for people. And this one father came in and started yelling at the store, whoever was working. And I don't know if this is a fable or a legend, but he comes in and he says, you know, why are you putting all these pregnancy products sent to my daughter? This is, you know, inappropriate, whatever. Amy, I think you've heard this story. And they're like, oh yeah, like, why are you putting all these in the circular? She's not pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, actually, Dad, I am pregnant. So the combination of the prenatal vitamins and all the other things that she bought triggered something in the system, which then had those unintended consequences of finding out through Target that your daughter is pregnant. So there is a lot of things about these automation and how things work in the future that have to be accounted for, because the unknown unknowns could be very dangerous and have a lot of real world ramifications if you're only seeking conversions and purchases, because then you're ignoring everything else, all the other externalities. And I'm sure you see in the news with Facebook and all these other platforms of what are those externalities and how is it changing our world and the way we consume media. So that is a little bit of a tangent, and sorry about that. But in terms of the shift back to privacy-centric measurement, is how can we know things work or don't work without passing that information? And I think that, you know, in the short term, that shift to the old school way of measuring is going to be an incomplete view. So one of the questions that we had in the chat was, you know, how are we accounting for factor ups? How are we accounting for, now we're only getting a very small view into the window of what the actual performance is. One of my favorite examples of this is last click attribution. And what that means is the last thing you do right before you purchase gets 100% of the credit. Now, you know, when you buy something, like if you're buying a car, you've seen ads for years, you've been in your friends' cars, you kind of know what make and model, but then giving all that credit to the last person is not exactly fair. Because if you go on this spiral, this death spiral of like, I'm only going to optimize to that, then you're only getting the people who are already ready to buy. So you're not influencing behavior, you're just capturing existing demand. It's almost like if you went to a bar, took 10 shots, and you blame only the last shot for getting you drunk. It's like, that's not how it works. So how do you split up that attribution? How do you create the credit of influence for your consumers and for your marketers in a way that captures that? So with Snapchat, it's a little bit further for the path to purchase. No one goes on Snapchat to say, I'm going to buy a car. Let me check out Snapchat and see the ads there. So there's a lot of things that need to happen in terms of like shifts in measurement from attribution, last click, that end of funnel thing, to a little bit more upper funnel, fractional credit and influence. So we do a lot with incrementality based measurement. And the incrementality based measurement is basically you have a control group and an exposed group. And my favorite story for this is pretend, you own a pizza shop, right? And you give a coupon book to two groups of people. And then let's say Alice and Bob, A and B. And Alice gives out the 100 coupons, 97 gets redeemed. And then Bob gives out 100 coupons, 20 get redeemed. You go, Alice, you crushed it. What'd you do? And she goes, oh, I stood right outside the door. As they opened the door, I handed them a coupon. Now you're like, now, how does that help my business? You're capturing the demand that's right there. And now you're discounting people who would have already bought. Bob was across town. He was at the movie theater. People were viewing content, kind of like you do on Snapchat. And they got the coupon and they go, oh, this is a good deal. I'm going to travel across town to this pizza shop and buy your pizza. And that's what incrementality is the difference between what they would have done without the ad versus what they do when they see the ad. And that lift and that behavior change is something that is kind of where things are shifting, is how do you influence as opposed to just capture. So I think that with that and the privacy, the layer of privacy over all that, of like asking the people, would you have bought that pizza anyways from Alice and Bob? Bob brought him across town. They're more influenced. Alice was already going to do it. They didn't change much. They were just there. So with the privacy-centric measurement, it's how do you test and measure those things in the real world in a way that's, protecting consumers' identity and doing so in a very responsible fashion. So a very long-winded way of saying that this is kind of what is evolving and shifting in our industry. And I think, for 2022 and moving forward is how do we do that responsibly and safely?
All great insights. And I love the conversation going on in the chat about quantum computing and the importance of measurement for storytelling and the connection of numbers to, actual humans, and the thread that gave to everything that was going on. So for the next 5, 6, 7, I don't know, however long you want to talk, Deidre, I want to come to you. First, let me say congratulations on your recent recognition. I want to make sure I get this right. Biz Bash's most influential event professional in the country.
One of. We know your extensive experience spans beyond the domestic sphere, though. So, because you've done stuff across the globe, so we're excited to hear from you. As we all know, we've all missed a lot of events, had to reschedule a lot of events, and we're really excited to hear or to see them starting back up. But what does that mean? What do you forecast about the big innovations in this events and entertainment space for the coming year? Thank you for the congratulations. Well, it's interesting because it's hard to predict with events because it's so focused on what is happening with the current climate and what that looks like and how that will continue to unfold. But I do think that some of the things that we've already seen will continue to be enhanced. So as John talked about, I think technology and the way that people engage with technology, not only at events, but in advance of events. I think brands and companies will want to know even more in real time what attendees are looking for, what they hope to gain, what would be the benefits for them to attend this event. And so then they will start to customize based on that feedback. I also think that contactless, as we talked about, will continue to increase as well. And I think that we're already starting to see that with some of the experiences that pop up with these AR apps on your phone, some that already are pre-downloaded. You can use your own telephone, so you don't need to use a device that's being provided. So again, you're not touching something else that other people are touching, but you are still getting a very cool experience. So definitely the increase in tech. And then I would say for the last one that I think, thinking small. And I know that we always think, oh, think big, but think small and more intimate. And with, look at micro weddings and how many people still got married over the past year and a half or almost 2 years now and they had, 20 people, or they had their best friends and their parents and siblings, and that's what they still spent a lot of money, but it was more meaningful to them because it was just the people who really loved them, they loved, and they wanted there, and they couldn't imagine their day happening without those people. So I think celebrations will really start, personal celebrations, social celebrations will start to look more like that. Even as venues continue to open, numbers for capacity increase, I think we will see that micro event or that experience still be something that's long-standing, because people are now realizing that it's more about the experience and not just the number of people that they have in attendance. And that also translates to brands. You can have 100 people there, but if they are not going to purchase your product, or they are repeat customers, so they're not looking to upgrade, then really, how are you expanding your reach? How are you attracting new customers? And how are you engaging them? And what makes them want to return? So if you're already, a fan of a sporting event, you're going to go because there's a drive and an excitement, but not so much with other types of events. If you already purchase, Apple products, you might want to go see a sneak peek of the newest, iPhone or the newest whatever that's coming out, but not so much if it's, a retail store that has clothing. What is the appeal? You know what you like, you know what your style is. So you can just either go into the store or purchase that online. But they want to engage you, and that also helps their bottom line. And so I think that we'll see brands that didn't traditionally have events because they have brick and mortar spaces that will start to use technology and these smaller experiences to really engage their customer base, to actually sustain their model, but also to show another way that they can make money as well.
It's great. I dabbled a bit in events many years ago when I was in industry, and I remember the constant drone when you have an event coming up of, can I get a VIP? Can I get a VIP? Can I get a VIP? So this is kind of like a manifestation of that, right? Like they want that small, exclusive, private experience. So really interesting and exciting stuff. I'm going to go ahead and make sure to point you all to the chat to make sure that if you have any questions, you can plug them in there. But I'd also love for anyone who has a question to unmute themselves and ask our expert panelists their thoughts and predictions, or your queries about things that may be coming in 2022. And while we wait for questions, feel free to interrupt me, guests. We do this for you, so please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. But while we wait for that to happen, would love to to ask everyone. We've talked about some really exciting, happy things we're looking forward to, great trends, right? These are all really exciting things. Protection of privacy, better fractional measures, quantum computing's possible application to improving small businesses or whatever, and events and how events are going to become really personalized experiences, but not everything's positive. So what are the challenges that we really need to overcome in the coming year that you all predict? And I'll just keep things in the same order. Amy, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see some real ethical challenges, particularly within the context of digital technologies and marketing. Digital technologies really allow marketers to have their finger on the pulse of their consumers, right, with accelerated speed, reach, and relevance. But, I think we inadvertently opened a sort of virtual Pandora's box, right, of kind of these ethical uncertainties, particularly relevant to privacy and security, as we alluded to earlier. And as marketers, I think we're going to have this increasing responsibility to kind of foster consumer confidence in the integrity of marketing, and doing that by ensuring that we're honest and transparent in our communications, that we collect consumer data in an ethical manner, are good stewards of that information, and safeguard the governance of that context. And I think the recent events with Facebook, for instance, have really highlighted the fact that we are kind of coming to a social reckoning of sorts, right? And not to get too political, but I think as marketers, we need to consider if our efforts at customer centricity and providing consumers with this really personalized digital experience, are we limiting their exposure and diversity of thought? Are we kind of inadvertently contributing to this sort of collective narrow-mindedness, or maybe a more parochial view of the world? And I think we have like a real moral imperative to consider what our role is in this process. And are we really doing what is in the best interest of the end consumer, on a collective level?
It seems like I should be a pro at unmuting myself after 6 million Zoom meetings, but I still forget. And I have a coffee cup somewhere that says you're on mute. That's my regular reminder. I'm actually going to go now, and we can come back to some of the challenges we might see, but I don't want to miss a chance to answer Anne's question. So she asks, any tips on engaging people on digital channels when we're training, educating, and selling? So John, that feels like a question that you might want to field first, and then we'll go to some of our other panelists if they have additional insights.
Yeah, I think that first, that's a great question. Keeping people engaged in Zoom, like the people walking by right now, I have not met yet, and I've been working at Snap for a year and a half. So I flew out to Santa Monica, and I'm meeting my team for the first time. So people I've video chatted with, did some trainings, had them start, working on my team, haven't met yet. So one of the things about, online training and selling and communicating is, how do you get people to multitask on task? Because people on Zoom tend to multitask. So I think a great example is the chat right down here. People are engaging and participating in a way where it's not just, one person talking, but several streams of conversation are happening at the same time, which I think is something that is much more organic in real life. When you have a meeting, there's always side conversations. And in this kind of format, that doesn't necessarily happen. It's someone has the floor, then someone else has the floor. So having a way to multitask on task, I think, is a very important thing. And having it come back around and have that participation so that they have engagement and stakes, to make it like, the reason I'm not just watching this on YouTube is because I can influence what's being shared. So I think, having that engagement is extremely important in these kind of environments. And the second part of that question, let's see, digital channels where we're training, educating, and selling. Yeah, and selling is a tough one. I think, as I talk to my clients, having that in-person communication and the level of trust that you have when you're talking to someone in person, you get a lot more transparency. Even with like the team that I had my team offsite, it's like being more forthcoming with things, because it's not being recorded, because it's not, or someone else could be recording it. It's definitely something that allows a more free flow form. So with customers, understanding what their real challenges are, selling to it, what is your pain point, uncovering those pieces requires a level of trust to share that. So as you start learning their business, learning what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and then what kind of solutions you can provide them that would scratch that itch or solve that problem, I think is something that is very difficult to do. And, making meetings more fun. I tend to show up late to my team meetings so that they could complain about me before I show up and have that free flowing, conversation, because I think that, in team unity, you have to have that piece. So, keep it light, keep it quick. Hopefully that answers the question, Anne. I don't know.
I love that you admit you show up for meetings late so people can talk about you. That's
well, it's funny because I show up and then they stop talking and I'm like, okay, well, you guys are making fun of me and that's okay.
all right.
I mean, who doesn't make fun of their boss? That's like kind of a thing, right? And I think that does unite a team in a way that, you kind of have to have that, right? I'm sure you guys can relate in some way here, but we won't say it because this is being recorded.
I mean, I teach students and they're not that shy about it. They meme me. They have imitations of like the ways that I think and the ways that I stand when I'm being serious. And they're a little more direct about it than your employees. So how nice. Does anybody else want to, Amy or Deidre, want to share any thoughts on this sort of idea of engaging people in digital spaces and the fact that we're all living in these digital spaces, so we're consumed by them, so that engagement piece maybe is a little harder. Amy, I see you unmuted first. You want to go first?
Well, just to take a purely marketer's perspective, it really is about knowing who your target audience is, right? And knowing their wants and needs, really developing this kind of implicit understanding of, how can you meet their needs? And just understanding what messaging is going to resonate most with them. And through digital storytelling or whatever it may be. But that really does, it all originates with knowing your audience first and foremost. And that way you can meet them where they're at.
That sounds like someone who might be teaching in our data marketing communications program. You know where that, it's a defining principle from our data. How do you connect with people with all of these data points you have now? So I love hearing you say that. Deidre, drop some knowledge bombs on us.
So in addition to knowing your audience, which I agree with 100%, you also have to make sure that you are tailoring the information to them. I mean, how many times have we in person said, oh, this meeting could have been an email? It's the same thing with Zoom. And I found myself, saying that yesterday I had to be online at 8 a.m. Because the rest of the agencies across the globe, of course, they all had different times. We were going over the new rebranding. And, I said to the head of the agency for US that I report to, this could have been an email. And she laughed. And I said, but no, really, we could have received the branding. We could have had a short video of what was being discussed. And then if we had questions, to then send those questions back once you collect that information. So it's the same thing with employees or other stakeholders in training. Send the information out there in digestible bits. If questions start coming back and there's similar questions, then that's maybe cause to have a Zoom where you are now sharing with everyone. These are the similar questions or the family of questions that we had. So let's focus on those a little bit more. And I think that it's, with everyone having Zoom fatigue and, you not only are doing trainings and learning sessions, but you're having meetings and also entertainment online, on screen, you need to really differentiate what's important and how it must be translated and where you can save time. And so if having a 15-minute or 30-minute meeting or training or something that you're sending out to people is more impactful to then be able to gather the information after the fact and address those questions, that might be more meaningful than having, an hour and a half or 2-hour training where everyone's, starting to fade and then, you still have to go through it again anyway.
I love that. So I was just talking to a colleague the other day about, it seems like everyone anticipates that a Zoom meeting is so easy that we should continue to just schedule another meeting and schedule another meeting. And the joke about it could have been an email is becoming even more prevalent. But I'm also seeing really cool virtual stuff happening. Like Adobe had their EduMax the other day, which is virtual currently, and they had a magician who performed for us, and we had boxes that were tailored for us shipped to our home. Y'all, it was really a very cool experience. So good and bad. So going back to our last challenge, or our last question about the challenges we're going to be facing, John, tell us, what do we need to be prepared for in 2022? What challenges are we going to hit that are new and we need to sort of figure out solutions for?
What to be prepared for? I mean, with 2020 and 2022, I don't think anyone was prepared for that. So me predicting what to be prepared for is a tall ask. What we need to prepare for, and is this in the context of marketing? I would assume.
Yes, let's keep it to marketing. We don't need to dance in everybody's sandbox outside of that.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, as COVID, as all these consumer behaviors change, investing in, different ways of doing things that might not come to fruition. That's a very vague answer. And what I mean by that is like, when COVID hit, everyone downloaded apps, and that really changed how people consumed. The people that had the apps, it was a gold rush. They got a whole bunch of downloads, a whole bunch of engagement. The people didn't, that they are now playing catch up. They're trying to grab back market share that they lost. So there is a lot of preparation that needs to be done if these environments change, if like a new like variant of COVID comes and everyone has to be back in quarantine again. What does that mean for your business? Preparing for those scenarios is something that businesses need to start thinking about and investing in. So even if it doesn't get used, it's one of those things that people who have like half-built things or like have prepared somewhat, they could spin it up and continue to invest in it a little bit further because they know roughly what works and doesn't. So there's a lot of preparation in terms of building those digital assets, building those kind of environments, and then being able to put it in market and test and iterate on it so that if something were to happen, you would be prepared for it. I would say that's probably like the biggest that I'm seeing with like retailers and restaurants. For travel or energy, which are my other two verticals, travel is kind of all over the place, you know, and these deals that are going and the promotions, it's a matter of like, what is the lifetime value of a consumer and what does it mean to get them in now and foster that relationship for later to pay dividends. And I think that's kind of the conversation that we had earlier of fostering those client relationships, personalization, and going deeper with them. So with that, I think preparing in a way of understanding your consumer, going closer to your consumer, being able to have a relationship with them so that you're not just a transaction, I think is another thing to prepare for. So tech and relationships with your consumers.
That's great. Before we come to Deidre to hear her thoughts on challenges, my friend's Mike Fulton. Hey, Mike, I didn't realize you were here, but thrilled that you are. He's asked a question that I think is one that you all might have some thoughts on. It says, what do each of you think about the massive movement of people leaving jobs? Our industries depend on the retention of our best talent and recruiting new staff to add to our efforts. So what are your thoughts about the massive movement of people leaving jobs?
I will start to speak to that as someone who recently left a job that I had been at for 6 years. I think the positive about it is that because of all of this innovation and opportunity, people who have certain skill sets that had been contained to one specific industry are now free to go to other industries because those skills are transferable. This is a time when, again, people are looking for those who have a different frame of, reference and way of thinking. And so I am still in events, but I'm at an agency. So while I had always been the in-house event planner, I am now on more of the strategy side and, the coming up with ideas and the ideation and how do we get people to come to this client's event and what can we recommend? So while, I will probably miss being the person that's running around and planning the event, it's letting me use another side of the skills that I have in being creative. And so I think that those opportunities are just wonderful for those who want to take them. And so, yes, on one hand, it is, the downside for those employers that are losing people. But I think just overall, when you think of the world and the movement of business, I think that it's great.
I think too, we can't overlook the fact that the people are looking for different kinds of work environments these days, whether that's hybrid or John apparently hasn't met his team in person in ages. How is that affecting the workplace from your all's perspectives?
Yeah.
And retention.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And yeah, I had my manager offsite yesterday. Today I'm having my team offsite. So I haven't met them yet, but I do think that, employee retention is extremely important. And, the institutional knowledge that someone has of how things get done, there's formal structure and informal structure. And I think the informal structure and soft power, not your bureaucratic, I'm the boss, this is how things work. It's more of this is how things get done. And this is who you have to talk to and win over. All of that institutional knowledge is extremely valuable and takes time to develop. So as people leave jobs, you lose that and the ability to get things done diminishes. So in order to build a flywheel of like growth and productivity, you have to take care of your workers. And I think that one of the things that's happening, and Mike, good to see in the chat there, the question of people leaving is, are businesses taking care of their employees? Now, I've been very lucky with, Google, Facebook, and Snap. They take care of their employees pretty well. Like they have free coffee, free food, a whole bunch of things. And it's all centered around, keeping your employees happy and keeping them focused on what they do best. So I think by creating these amenities, creating these environments, people want to go into the office. I live in New York, and I go into the office like once, twice a week, just because it's good to see people, have conversations. No one on my team is in other offices, but other people that are in my office, it's good to just kind of have that back and forth ping ponging of ideas. So, there's this concept of the third place. So your first place is home, your second place is work, and your third place is where you go out and meet people and talk and have, an environment. It could be a library, cafe, bar, whatever you decide to do. And I think that's really where a lot of those ideas happen, because if your first and second place is working from home, you're kind of stuck in this bubble that you're not growing your skill set or having those conversations. And I think that, with this employee retention and having people stay at companies or not, are you providing growth for them in that current environment? And that's harder to do now than ever. So it's definitely, how do you invest in your employees? How do you invest in their growth? How do you provide an environment that they want to stay at? And that's all about being extremely proactive. And I think the people that don't are the people that are losing employees right now. And it's tough. I don't have the answer. I just know it's tough.
Love these great deep conversations, but we are at the hour. So thanks everyone so much for sharing your time and joining us for this important discussion. Special thanks to John, Amy, and Deidre. Everyone, please be sure to visit integrate.wvu.edu for upcoming sessions, recordings, previous episodes, and to subscribe to receive updates. Also, be sure to check out the rest of Comm's Fest. The schedule can be found at communicationsboard.org. And everybody have a great week and stay healthy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.